Hello, Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network listeners. I am Jeff Hawkins, co-host of Shake Them Ropes, with a very special announcement. If it's been a while or you've never listened to us before, the original gang is back. Myself and Rob McCarran, back talking wrestling. We have no idea where this show's going to go, where we're going to keep any of the old bits or any of the old things in there. It's going to be a process. It's going to be a journey, and we'd like for you to come along with us. Only on Shake Them Ropes on the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network.
This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
Welcome back to Those Days, a Michinoku Pro retrospective. Those Days, Episode 11, Fukumen Masked Man League. Those Days is brought to you by Open the Voice Gate and the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. You can find Those Days on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network feed or on the Open the Voice Gate feed, wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow Open the Voice Gate on social media at Open Voice Gate. If you would like to donate to Open the Voice Gate and support our projects, click the link in the show notes. It'll take you to our redcircle.com landing site. You click a red box that says sponsor this podcast, and you can set up a one-time or reoccurring donation. I'm one of your hosts. It's your old pal, Mike Spears. I am joined by Case Lowe. And Case, last time, the kind of trope that we had for the first 10 episodes of Those Days finally came to fruition as the great Sasuke finally made his tour of Mexico in May of 1995, coming out of a time period with Michinoku Pro appearing on the Bridge of Dreams show, a set of shows in Koriyama, and the emergence of one Doc Dean on the show. But Case, this is going to be a different kind of episode, at least so far in our series for episode 11, because this whole episode is solely devoted, other than a couple little mini tangents, towards the first ever Fukumen World League, also known at that time as the Fukumen Masked Man League. So I'm really excited to get into it and get into what Michinoku Pro did over their big summer tour of 1995, because we're talking about essentially this tournament that takes place across a 28-show tour of northern Japan in the summer of 1995.
Yeah, as I sit and think about just what the legacy of Michinoku Pro is, and 1990s Michinoku Pro to be specifically, which we're covering here, there is no question that the show that looms largest, the biggest thing that there ever was, the name that we stole for this podcast is the 10/10/1996 show. But when I think about, okay, what would be behind that? What is Michinoku Pro best associated for outside of that 10/10/96 show? And you could vaguely throw the idea of Kaientai DX out there. You could vaguely throw the idea of Great Sasuke out there. But I think, at least for the type of person that this show was going to find, I think the 1995 Masked League would be the second place in terms of the largest legacy of Michinoku Pro during this era, which is very interesting because 1995 is not a year that we're going to spend a ton of time on. We've had two episodes covering 1995. This will be the third. The next episode we will close out the year. Now, granted, we're going to close out the year in sort of an expedited fashion because we're going to watch a lot of footage for that next episode. But this felt like one of those rare instances where I didn't want to go from July to September, July to October, go through the tag league. I just wanted to dedicate a certain amount of time to this tournament, to this era, to this tour, because I think it deserves it. And this is going to be probably a much more in-ring intensive episode of Those Days than people are used to. There's still going to be timeline anecdotes along the way, but I just think the wrestling in this episode is so strong that it deserves its own episode.
Yeah, and I feel like, at least for me, when we're like talking about the giant tentpole events in Michinoku Pro history. We've already hit on a couple of them with, of course, the Super J Cup appearances in '94 and kind of Sasuke taking over the world, and then at least some of the little minor notes that might be more known in Japan than America, such as what happened with the first show that they had in Korakuen Hall. But at least to me, when I look at this '95 first Fukumen World League, it this is something where I can only refer to like my own personal experience, and my interests. Like I this is something that I would like to kind of pick the brain of a David Bixenspan or Chris Zellner about, because to me, at least, going into this episode and going into this project, it felt like the first Fukumen Mass League was one of those tape trader kind of just cornerstones that if you were ordering Michinoku Pro, first you would get 1096, of course, Ryuku, though, these days. But with the way that this was delivered and the time-wise of like when this was, the fact that you would very easily be able to pick up like these two essentially a compilation VHS tapes and be able to watch this entire tournament with like the appearances of Dos Caras and other things, it had to be, if not the number 2 seller for these tape traders, when you're talking about Michinoku Pro case, it had to be like when you're looking at events and especially looking at like commercial releases, one of like the top 5, I feel like. But it's something that at least that's what it feels like to me.
Yeah,
but
no,
I'd
I mean,
imagine
absolutely. It's not
like,
only. I think the interesting thing with this tournament is you really start to see, in the same way that when you and I talk about Toryumon and we talk about the formation of M2K, which is in the spring of 2000, but really by the time they get to 2001, it's a promotion that has grown out of their roots. They're still honoring where they came from, but it's a promotion that has its own life in the same way that, say, 2021 AEW, was tied to what was founded in 2019. But 2019 AEW was playing off of the lore of previous promotions and, hoping that people would have a basic understanding of who the best friends were, who Jack Evans and Angelico were. And it was a promotion without its own lore. By 2021, it had its own thing. And Toryumon in 2001, it had its own thing. And this is a tour and a concept that I don't know if divorced from Universal is the right term, but this feels like
I think it's fair to say it that.
Yeah. It feels like a grown-up version of Michinoku Pro where they have fully formed an identity and they're able to execute a tournament this way. Whereas even if they tried this, say, in July of 1994, when they did, oddly enough, the Universal Homecoming show with Gato and Jado and Ultimo Dragon, like, I just don't think that promotion was mature enough to handle a concept like this. And to the tape trading point, if you're telling me I'm going to get footage of Dos Caras, which, okay, just the idea of, let's say I want to get into Lucha, but I don't know where to start. That's a selling point for me. I'm going to get a bunch of Sasuke matches. And, oh, by the way, Jerry Lynn is on this tape. All right, then you've got my attention.
Right. And I think that's a really prescient point about the maturation of Michinoku Pro, because if we pull it back and look at Michinoku as an overall timeline, like, we are not at the point where the Tohoku Junior titles are about. Like, that's funny enough. Like, I think after the breadth of what those days will cover is this, but for a promotion like Michinoku Pro, like, yes, they had the tag leagues and like we talked about them and we had, I think we have covered like one of the final matches, I think, of the 94 one, but this is kind of in like the wrestling tradition in a lot of ways outside of these days. This big like flag raising show that in a lot of ways how Michinoku Pro was able to be taken seriously at a very quick rate when you compare other independent promotions before them and afterwards. This, I feel like, does a lot of things of being like, yeah, no, we are a Japanese wrestling promotion and this is our tournament, because if you are a major Japanese wrestling promotion, okay, so what do you have every year?
Big tournaments.
A big tournament. So it feels really appropriate that they would have a tournament in their own way at this point in 1995.
I agree with that. I was very excited to revisit this footage. I guess I should ask you, before we dive into the timeline, what your relationship with this footage was prior to this podcast.
Other than, and I can't tell you which one of the two it was that I saw, Case, other than one of the two Dos Caras versus Sasuke matches that I would have seen like on a ditch or something like that. Uh, Greatly, other than knowing Jerry Lynn is the one that unmasks, came in completely fresh. And over the last few days, going through the two comp tapes, it's been a very rewarding experience to kind of have this very self-contained, like building upon itself tournament where I think even for like 1995 and considering the kind of promotion that like Michinoku Pro did, like if you take the two tapes and you're able to get some of the matches that in versions of the tapes don't have in full, if you're able to watch like all of those like back to back over like a 5 hour time period, it very much kind of felt like the feeling I would get with getting the bowl of DVDs or a Chikara Tag World Grand Prix or King of Trios set. Like it was a really, in a way, coming into this blind, it provided a nostalgic feeling that I wasn't necessarily expecting coming out of it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I certainly agree with it. It does have a sort of King of Trios spirit to it that I had never really thought of before, but I think that's a great comparison to make.
With like the outsiders as stunt gimmicks kind of thing, gives it that little bit of charm that I feel like King of Trios would have with some things.
Yeah, I'm sure deep down Quackenbush is sad that he was never able to pull off this style of tournament. I mean, this seems like something that Chikara just outright could have taken, and I'm almost a little surprised sitting here now. I'm like, oh my god, I kind of can't believe Chikara didn't do this.
And given the relationship that Quackenbush would have at times with Michinoku Pro,
where
like
Quackenbush would pay for his plane tickets, those relationships, yes.
Yeah, and get in return nice banners for at one time period. But you would think that that he had to pitch Sasuke like, hey, how about Chikara Masked Man League, Fukumen Masked League US?
Yeah,
and
in
kind
the
of
same
pitch
way
that way.
In the same way that Rev Pro has done a J Cup tournament, and I think there's been a US J Cup tournament too. The fact that there wasn't
there was a US one. That was LP at a time before LP kind of grew out of some things, you would say.
What's his? I feel like I haven't seen him wrestle in forever. Is he healthy now?
Yeah, no, he's healthy, cancer free, and all that. He was the New Japan World TV champion as of the Tokyo Dome.
Right.
Yeah. He had that meandering match with Brooks. Yeah,
that sounds right. It does seem like he should have bought the IP to this at some point so he could run the American-based Mass League tournament. That's a very funny idea now that I think about it. In terms of myself in this footage, I've referenced this before, and I've actually got the document pulled up now that is just a copy and paste from the original post that he made on not the F4W forum, not the Voices of Wrestling Discord, but the Voices of Wrestling forum that used to exist. There was a point in time in which our friend Alan Forel made an essential watch guide of 90s Michinoku Pro stuff, and it was the first time that I had dove into this Michinoku Pro stuff. It coincided with the Greatest Wrestler Ever project on Pro Wrestling Only. So my guess is Alan would have posted this in 2015. And I've kept I've kept this match listing as a just sort of a thing to have just in case anybody ever asks me for Michinoku Pro match recs. I normally just send them the matches that Alan laid out and then Alan's descriptions for a few of the matches. And so I had seen of the matches we have in full, which we're primarily going to break down just the matches that aired in full on the Volume 1 comp tape for this Mass League, with a few anecdotes along the way of some of the stuff that we saw that was clipped. But, I was familiar with the Sasuke Dos Caras matches. I was familiar with the Sasuke Delphin matches, sort of one with just two big names that I would have watched out of context at some point. And then obviously I had seen the Nanawa cross match, but it had been years and years since I had revisited it. So it was very exciting to revisit that. I had never watched this tournament with full context before, and we'll discuss it more when we get to the Nanawa cross match. But approaching it this time around, now knowing that, for the last 3 years, or I guess the first 3 years of this promotion, but the last 3 years that we've covered, that Nanawa is this stooge heel who's always, by the side of whoever the 1A heel is in this promotion, to see him knowing that context now, with the crowd in the palm of his hands as a babyface for this match and for this match only, I thought was a fascinating thing to experience. And so for that reason, and I recommend this to anybody who has maybe seen this footage before, but has never watched the tournament all the way through, or maybe they've been watching along with us and they weren't sure if they were going to go back and revisit some of the stuff, I really think it's worth doing, because I had a new level of appreciation for that match and for the work that Nanawa did in that match, just based on now watching Michinoku Pro from the very beginning.
Yeah, and also like the clip kind of show to show storytelling and self-contained kind of nature of this really makes me want to, in a lot of ways, encourage people to watch the whole thing. The matches in full that we will be discussing on this show, I'm gonna just list them off here, and then when we get to them as we go through the tournament, we will of course take our time on these. It's from the opening show in Yahaba, Golgotha Cross versus Super Dolphin, and the Great Sasuke versus Grand Nanawa. Fast forward 3 weeks to the time period of August 12th and August 13th. We'll be talking about the rematch of the Great Sasuke versus Super Dolphin, as well as the next night, the Great Sasuke versus the Convict, and then the Delphin Corps explodes with Grand Nanawa and Super Delphin, and then at this time, that's when that's when Dos Caras joins the tour, and we'll discuss his one of his last matches in the tour in the block stage against Dos Caras from August 23rd, and then of course we'll talk about the final match of Fukumen World League, the Dos Caras versus the Great Sasuke final, as well as Gorgon or Golgotha Cross versus Grand Nanawa, the Apuestas match. But the nice thing about this kind of thing, if you go through the comp tapes, you essentially get to see stuff from every single match in the tournament. And sometimes you see the things, you go like, yeah, no, I think this is about as much as I wanted to see of the King's Cross. But at other times you're like, you know what? I really would have liked to see the Convict versus the Bandit in full. Like, that's something coming out of this show or coming out of this tournament that I feel kind of strongly about, is more of the Convict, very much so.
I mean, God, we're going to spend an extensive amount of time talking about the Convict on this show, and it's something I look very much forward to getting to. I do think that's an interesting point, though. So, and we'll have all this stuff linked on the Voices of Wrestling Discord of the Open the Voice Gate channel, but it's primarily one comp tape that aired a bunch of matches in full, and then a second one that was mostly clips, or also some matches that aired in full on the first tape as well. I think maybe the Delphin Chorus match on the second comp tape is the only sort of exclusive full-length match on that. But nevertheless, I was thinking about just the way that tournament distribution has changed over our lifetimes, because I still came into Japanese wrestling at a point where the G1 was available on Ustream, and I think it was like $140 for the entire tournament. And we all looked at that as like, oh my God, what an amazing deal this is. We're going to be able to watch the G1 live in HD, and it only costs $140. And I was thinking about just the way that has colored wrestling history of
incredibly so. Yeah.
Not seeing all of the G1s in full, especially not seeing all the Champion Carnivals in full, not having this tournament in full, and it really changing the way that we look at some of these tournaments. And I guess maybe this is just a random pro 2010s New Japan talking point, which I wasn't trying to make when I started this sentence, of like, hey, we think those are the best tournaments ever, and we saw everything. But it is just a funny thing to think about, the way that I think we have, I mean, I forget how many you just listed there, but 7 or 8 full-length matches from this tournament. And we're like, hey, this is the highlight of Japanese wrestling tournaments of the 90s, and we have 8 matches from a very long tournament.
Right. Yeah. No, this is a tournament that goes 28 shows. This was essentially their entire August, and starting in the last week of July, that this was what they decided to do for out of it. And I have to say, at a certain point, going through the clips, and me being the kind of type A sicko that I am, that I'm looking at my 6 pages of notebook paper, where at a certain point I was just writing down like, okay, Grand Nanawa versus Golgotha Cross, not the mass match, but from each and away. I'm like, okay, gnarly top rope Rana bomb reversal. That's all I have for that. And to be honest, in a way, I kind of appreciate the fact that that at least as an exercise, like imagine like there's no way that we would be able to cover this tournament in full if it was available. Like the only way that this tournament would be able to be covered would be like in the moment, like Lanza does like G1 reviews. Like that's the only way that it could be kind of tackled. And instead, it's 5 hours of clips and in like 9 or 10 complete matches, and some you have to kind of seek out a little bit. I kind of like that. It was maybe it is in this like maximum consumption thing. I enjoy like the attempt at restraint because I know that I would have been gone insane by watching all 10 Grand Sheik matches by the end of this tournament if they were all available.
I was actually a little, and this happens every time we do one of these episodes where I get a little intimidated by the footage that we have to watch. And then more often than not, I'm like, oh, that wasn't bad at all. In fact, I already want to watch more for the next episode. But this one in particular, I was like, man, these are long uploads. I hope this goes by quickly. And then once you actually break down what the footage is, it was no problem at all. And it was a pretty fun and pretty easy watch. So overall, those are my thoughts on the Masked Man before we get into the individual matches themselves. As I directly associate it with this idea that Michinoku Pro has grown up. Again, a year prior in the calendar in 1994, they were doing the Universal Reunion show, and here they are now with this completely original concept and this really unique idea that feels like a grown-up, fully fleshed out promotion.
Yeah, this is, to me, in a lot of ways, like this big tent post, like this is them as this kind of promotion. And I mean, like you also have the fact that Dos Caras, like already at this point in 95, a Lucha Libre legend, coming in for the tournament, adding a level of kind of prestige to it. And I came to a realization just now, because I think a lot of my garbage indies watching has been trying to scratch the Michinoku itch without going and like watching ahead or watching stuff for an episode that we would record in 4 weeks. Like I feel like that's why
I completely understand that. Yeah, when we were doing on the Open the Voice Gate that was uploaded before this episode comes out, we were talking about the greatest multi-man wrestlers in history, and so I was watching some old CIMA footage, and I had to stop myself from just watching all of the 1998, 1999 CIMA stuff we have on Michinoku Pro, because I was like, I think we're going to get to that. Like, I need to hold off. I'm not going to revisit that now, but God, does it scratch an itch that I really would like to scratch right now.
Oh, no, yeah. No, I absolutely am with you on this. In case, I think we should kind of start the meat of this episode, not with the Fukumen Mask League, but we have to kind of visit some characters and introduce a new one that will become a central character in our story. And before we get into the Fukumen Mask League, let's talk about the big events that happened in July of 95 outside of Michinoku Pro.
Yeah, oddly enough, we have to start with the news of another masked wrestler who was not in this tournament, but we have from the July 10th, 1995 Wrestling Observer newsletter, the note from Dave where he says, Satoru Sayama is training a protege to become the 4th Tiger Mask, with the first 3 being Sayama, Mitsuharu Misawa, and Koji Kanemoto. He'll make his pro debut on July 15th at Korakuen Hall against Great Sasuke on an independent show. Dave writes, it's way too much pressure to put on someone in his debut match to give him the Tiger Mask gimmick. I ask you, Mike, other than, I guess, Masato Yakushiji, it feels like Tiger Mask is probably the first true influx we have of fresh blood, of this is somebody that did not have ties to Universal. This is now a new wrestler for Michinoku Pro to play with, yes?
Oh, absolutely so. And I think it is like with the idea that you had Sayama in a lot of ways, Sayama and Hamada, when we talked about episode 1 about the formation of Universal and why Universal was the way it was, and their kind of relationship. It shows you how quickly things come full circle, that Sayama at this point is like Sayama 95. Is he just full on promoting Shudo stuff? And because I don't think because this is going to be a real dumb question I'm going to ask you here, because Sayama's not involved with the UWFI at all at this point. So this is kind of Sayama doing something to kind of stay in the news in a lot of ways. But he finds this guy, and if you are going to debut someone as this kind of character, the person you would want to have him go up against is kind of the closest thing, like at this time period, of like what a new generation Tiger Mask kind of guy would be, and that is Great Sasuke, at least in
Yeah.
1995.
Well, it goes to the point that we were talking about this being a grown-up promotion where Sayama, who I'm sure at this point, and I don't know this for sure, because again, Sayama is, for whatever reason, sort of a weird blind spot for me historically. I'm sure he wasn't in the good graces of the New Japan office at the time. I'm sure he wasn't in the good graces of the All Japan office ever. So the fact that Sayama's coming out and saying, I want my new protege to be in Michinoku Pro is a massive stamp of approval for Michinoku Pro. And you got to remember in the last episode, on the May 14th Michinoku Pro show, Sayama showed up and said, hey, I'm creating a new Tiger Mask. I want him to learn from the Michinoku guys. I want him to work like a Michinoku Pro wrestler. And at the time, he would have been promoting Vale Tudo. So
Yeah.
whatever he's got going on there, I'm sure it was a legitimate business practice, and I'm sure that he made a lot of money off of it.
Yeah, no, actually, funny enough, a promotion that I've been seeing a lot of in my own spare time, the Reborn Tokyo Pro Wrestling, he actually kind of comes out of whatever sort of retirement you would call him in '96. And of course, he will be making appearances in Michinoku proper in '96 as well. But you look at him in '95, and he's doing like exhibition matches with the new Tiger Mask. He is just in a lot of ways, he does a match on the Inoki Festival against Kuneyaki Kobayashi, and until really he gets landed and starts really doing stuff with Michinoku Pro during that time, he's not a grounded wrestler in a lot of forms. Like, in it would basically be this introduction of Tiger Mask 4 as the way that, I mean, in '97 he does stuff with New Japan. He has his own martial arts special, and it seems like he gets back into a working relationship with Inoki in that sort of way. That, like, this, at least from my understanding, is kind of his way back into his foot back into the door after everything with like Shuto and all of that. Apparently, I wish that this would be on tape. There's a Tiger Mask versus Sho Funaki match from '96 in UWFI. So he does have some light involvement with it.
Okay, gotcha. Now, our first bit of footage is from July 15th. It is this martial arts festival show from Cork and Hall that I had never seen this footage before. Mike, I don't know how you found this, but we do have... I mean, seriously, because I looked everywhere for this and I couldn't find it. But we do have the footage of the Tiger Mask 4 debut with him and Sasuke in Cork and Hall wrestling in what looks like a boxing ring. And
that's because there is like shoot fighting happening around this. Just because it is such a wild thing that you'll appreciate this. Let me get that card back pulled up for me. Other people on this show is Okamura versus Ryumago. Shigeo Okamura versus
that's CMLL MLW superstar Okamura.
Crusher Klein versus Koji Katao in an MMA match.
And I don't know Crusher Klein.
He is an Ontario wrestler who,
that sounds bad.
Really has not done a whole lot outside of this time period. Only 38 matches on record on Cage Match.
But we do get the official debut of Tiger Mask on tape, which is crazy that you found this. I was very excited to see this footage.
I found a comp tape on an Internet Archive. And I was searching for martial arts festival. I was surprised. It just was like phrasing it right. But yeah, this is from a comp tape. It's 6 minutes clipped. And it's our first clips on Tiger Mask. And this comp tape is kind of devoted to Tiger Mask in this match, and that how the production in a lot of ways was focusing not on the match itself, but focusing on Tiger Mask 4.
And so, you know, one of the things that I'm interested in going back and visiting, because as of the time we're recording this, New Japan is sort of winding down the career of this Tiger Mask. You know, we're seeing him at the very dying days of his career at this point, whereas now with Michinoku Pro, we're getting to watch him from the very beginning. And my opinion on him has always been, I really like him in Michinoku Pro, and then when he jumps to New Japan, I don't really like that, what would be considered his prime. And then I kind of like grumpy Tiger Mask 4 once we reached the 2010s. But I'm excited to add him into the fold because for what this was, which we're getting a clipped debut match in which Sasuke is by and large killing himself on this martial arts festival show, reoccurring theme on this show, by the way, Sasuke killing himself. I really enjoyed what we saw of Tiger Mask.
Yeah, he looks like he has a level of like eminent skill already off the bat, like in a way that I did not look too much into Tiger Mask's like back history. I didn't do too much into that aspect of it, but it does like really like make you wonder how much like prep he had, how much he was really kind of training with this. I doing a little kind of thing. He trained with Sayama after failing the SWS test. And that's not from Sayama. That's from Masao Orihara, who's a known yarn teller. So kind of interesting. Like he is out of nowhere and in this kind of match where Sasuke is doing like established like moves that were done on the first 3 Tiger Masks. And Tiger Mask 4 just feels immediately a part of the fold and feels right. And you see him by the end of the tournament, by the end of the Fukumen Mask League, he is already fully a part of the Michinoku fold and is in the ring for all of like the post tournament festivities.
Yeah, so Dave continues in the 7/24/95 Observer. He says the 4th Tiger Mask debuted on an independent show on July 15th at Korakuen Hall, taking on Great Sasuke. The newspapers reported it as a good match. No word on who the identity of the newest Tiger Mask is, although he is the protege of the original Satoru Sayama, and it is believed this was his first pro match, and wearing that legendary gimmick is far too much pressure to put on anyone that green. Tiger Mask combined high-flying moves with submissions in the match, which ended with Sasuke winning via countout in 15:39. After the match, Sasuke announced that Tiger Mask would start up with Michinoku Pro in September, and that is true. And in our next episode, we will get the debut and subsequent, I think 3 matches total in the next episode for Tiger Mask 4.
Yeah, it's worth kind of talking about what actually happened in the finish of the match because it's not exactly what Dave writes. So Sasuke does win by countout. He does this absolutely insane top rope drop kick from the top rope to the floor where Tiger Mask was prone after a Sasuke special, and the crowd rejects Sasuke winning this match. They start booing and they start chanting "restart" as they cut promos afterwards. It's kind of a wild moment that it's completely like absent of wrestling history that this happened on this show. That the crowd that was clearly there for Sayama to see this Tiger Mask was not interested in seeing the great Sasuke win this match in this manner.
No, which is funny because Sasuke, again, just from the clip footage that we have, puts on such a heroic performance that I couldn't imagine booing him afterwards. For him to do a space flying tiger drop over it's a 4-roped boxing ring, and then to also do, and I believe this was the move that led to the countout finish, the drop kick off the top rope to the floor. It's like, all
Brutal.
right, this man has my attention. I would certainly cheer him, but Korakuen Hall felt otherwise.
Yeah, no. They wanted to see this Tiger Mask 4, and I think the interesting thing, kind of like seeing him and like being going to be able to track the early part of his career, is I feel like, of course, Sayama and Misawa are so well known as like these, as how it's Misawa transcend Tiger Mask. Kanemoto later would reject being Tiger Mask. This guy, in a lot of ways, has a lot. I think that some of the pressure that is talked about in 95, looking at it in 2026 kind of lens, he was set up as well as one would want for a new Tiger Mask in the 90s. And I think we could say in like hindsight, he greatly succeeded at that task.
I would agree with that. So we move on from an MMA show that had the debut of Tiger Mask 4 and, of course, an appearance from our friend Koji Kitao. And we have to pivot to the World Wrestling Federation. We said when we covered the end of 1994, when Jinsei Shinzaki jumped to the WWF and became Hakushi, that we weren't going to spend a ton of time talking about his run in North America, in the same way that once he starts wrestling a lot in FMW and All Japan in the later part of the 90s, that we're not going to factor that in a ton to what we cover. It has to stay sort of true to Michinoku Pro for us to care. But when we talked about him signing, I did say on the podcast, I said, well, if there's anything specific from that Hakushi run, because this is a complete and total blind spot for me, if there's anything from that Hakushi run that we should talk about, please let us know. And the feedback we got on that was that we have to talk about what he was doing in July of 1995 with Bret Hart. And so Dave writes in the 7/17/95 Wrestling Observer newsletter, he says, Hakushi appears to be phased out as originally his run with Bret Hart was going to last into the fall, and it's obvious that's been totally dropped with Hart being programmed probably starting at SummerSlam against Dr. Yankum, parentheses, Glenn Jacobs. Hakushi was even doing jobs for Adam Bomb at the B-Towns, and his angle with Bret Hart has been totally dropped. And then he would continue in the 731 Observer saying, no news from the 7/24 Monday Night Raw taping in Louisville, Kentucky, except what aired live. They did a vignette proclaiming the debut of Dustin Rhodes as Gold Space Dust, a cowboy from Hollywood, and Shane Douglas as Dean Douglas, who did a vignette doing a school teacher gimmick, which ironically is his job in real life. The Douglas vignette was a major disappointment, and his great delivery on ECW interviews was non-existent. This was a segment that was boring and seemed to go on forever with no substance. Aside from that, the Raw show was the best Raw of the year because of the Bret Hart versus Hakushi blow-off match. It appears this was Hakushi's last match with the WWF, and word we got was that he wanted to leave, and it certainly appeared this was the last appearance of Shinja, real name Akio Sato. Hart won with a sharpshooter by submission, then pile drove Shinja after the match. It was Hakushi's best performance in the WWF, and a match every bit of 4 stars, including him doing the first space-flying tiger drop I've ever seen in the United States. The hard head that Hakushi had been using was stolen by Jean-Pierre Lafitte, giving the impression that Hart would then be working a program with him going forward. And so, Mike, we have to talk about the 7/24/95 Monday Night Raw match between Bret Hart and Hakushi, which is simultaneously a really, really good TV match and also a reflection of how dire wrestling was in the United States in 1995. If this is being applauded and lauded, rather, as the best match on wrestling TV in 1995.
Yeah, and I know you said 95 was a blind spot for you. It wasn't for me, and that's why I kept my mouth shut, because I really do not care for new generation era WWF. It's just, for me, Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart, I get who they are. I rank them accordingly, but turned down because of my personal feelings about them as wrestlers. And instead, what we got here was the delight of Jensei Shinzaki really kind of going all out and having someone in Bret Hart who was willing to go along for the ride and do non-Bret Hart things in this match. And I think in a lot of ways, like, giving this to become what is now considered like the best Hakushi match that happens in WWF, like, it is very much a Shinzaki match as it would have been adapted into WWF as this character. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was, for what it was and the trappings that it was stuck in, I really enjoyed it. I probably would have enjoyed it a lot more if you just would have plopped them in Viking Hall at this time and did this match, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I mean, that's the crazy thing, is I think this is a match that is absolutely worth watching. I think it's really fun. I also think, and this is partially just, the product of recording this during an era in which AEW exists, is our standard for American TV wrestling has just dramatically changed. And so to me, this is like
it's evolved.
You completely.
You know?
I mean, this is, and again, it's a nice 3.5-star wrestling match that, quite honestly, I wish Dynamite and Collision would have more of. This 10-minute, non-exhaustive, compact, to the point style of match that I think is missing in the current state of American wrestling TV. But the ceiling of American TV wrestling has been raised so much that paragraph from Dave, and it's not his fault because he's writing it in real time, but it almost comes across as cute now, where it's like, oh, this was the best thing they had. Oh my God, like, this is a match that would happen on Dynamite now.
Yeah. The space flying tiger drop, like, seeing the Louisville, Kentucky crowd just go insane for like, because it must have been like seeing an alien at that time, given what the 1990s pre-Attitude Era was in the WWF. Like, that is a really kind of cool thing to say. But yeah, no, like the trappings of this match, Vince McMahon just screeching on commentary about Hakushi
Oh,
is fined for using the rail, calling him the modern day kamikaze nonstop. Jerry Lawler was never good at commentary, and I'm just
no.
glad that now we are now adults to admit that he was just a horny creep on commentary with a squeaky voice.
So I'm very glad you said both of those things, because I had those both in my notes. Was one, Hakushi throws Brett into the barricade.
He
and
hot
Vince,
shots him
yeah.
like
And
immediately.
Vince says he's going to get fined for that, which I've never know. I like that's the first I would have ever heard of that being a rule in the WWF. I was fascinated by that because that just seems like I think one of the great problems plaguing American wrestling, and this has been the case forever because Vince and Vince's cronies have run it for the last 40 years, but like I actually think the lack of rules and the lack of structure are a tremendous detriment to wrestling. And I think rules and structure make it so much better when those rules and that structure is broken or deviated from. Like, that makes it so much more entertaining. So to hear that at one point the WWF had that as a kayfabe rule was completely fascinating to me.
Jack Tunney was pissed.
Yeah. It also, I don't know what it says about me, where we are watching digital copies of like 4th generation VHS tapes that were uploaded to the internet and then preserved. And luckily people like you and I are insane enough to watch them, of a regional independent wrestling company in Japan that cultivated this aesthetic in their live shows where Japanese people would go and sit on the floors and not sit in chairs and create this great atmosphere. And for some reason watching that, I go, God, that's what wrestling is. That's art. That's such a great thing to see. Whereas I was bombarded and, dare I say, assaulted by the commentary of Vince McMahon and Jerry Lawler in this match, where they were just so unbelievably off-putting for the entire 10-minute match. And I really just hated what I was experiencing with those two behind the desk.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, in 2026 eyes and ears, it's just utterly kind of exhausting in its way. But you get to see a lot of kind of wild Bret Hart in this that I think is also worth kind of going out of your way for, and watching enough of the guy to know that like how he is when there's a match that he's actually very intrigued by. You can kind of tell like this, because that flying space that flying tiger drop is immediately followed up by Bret Hart doing a wild Vader bomb to the outside.
It's
splash.
insane. And I look, historically, I am not a Bret guy. And I've always I understand that he's great. I can acknowledge that he's great. That I've never once been excited to watch a Bret Hart match. There is just something about
Clinical.
But also, I think it's partially an aesthetic thing. I would say, because I hope I have the sort of I hope I have the right to say this as somebody doing a wrestling podcast right now about wrestling that happened 30 years ago, that despite I'm 27 now, so I feel like I have a great historical appreciation of things that came before me. I'm very interested in history. I'm very interested in knowing about what happened before me so I can understand how we got here. There are two things that, just from a visual perspective, despite them being in my wheelhouse of interest, that I really struggle with. One of them is pre-1998 NFL, like pre-Elway winning his last Super Bowl. There is something about older NFL games, whereas I can watch old basketball in my free time for fun. Baseball, there's the beauty of it that it's kind of always looked the same, and I think that's really romantic. If you show me an NFL game from 1986, I'm just like, oh God, I just don't like the way that looks. I don't know NFL history like that. I'm not into it. The other thing is Bret Hart, where I'm just like, I understand he's great, but there is something about him that I just don't like looking at. That being said, that weird quasi Vader bomb to the floor was fucking awesome. And I think somebody should steal that.
Oh my God. Yeah, Mark Davis doing that would be insane.
Sorry, I was taking a swig of vanilla Coke, but yes, no, that would absolutely be insane. It's also, and I guess this is my final point on this match, is it's just what makes me so angry about North American wrestling and Vince being in control of it for so long, because I don't know how you could watch this match and not go like, oh, we have to push Jinsei Shinzaki. This is clearly somebody that we should be investing in. Like, it just drives me nuts that this is kind of the apex of his career and that it wasn't the start of something truly great.
Right, yeah. And you know that this is like a 90s and really just a Vince McMahon kind of thing, that after this kind of match, things peter out the way they do.
Yeah, it's such a bummer. So Dave writes in The Observer, this is the August 7th, 1995 Observer, that Shinjo was dropped from his last appearance at the 724 Raw show after getting pile driven by Bret Hart, and he started on 728 as a manager for WAR in Japan. Hakushi, who was thought to be leaving since Shinjo was his interpreter, wowed everyone with his match with Bret Hart and is sticking around, which was his own decision, as the company had never decided to let him go, but there was thought that he was going to leave. So at least for now, we have a little bit more of Hakushi in the WWF and Jinsei Shinzaki in North America. Mike, I don't know if you know this, because I don't know if I've sent you the notes for the next episode yet, but...
You haven't. Yeah.
Okay.
What's up?
Well, I will send you that when we're done here. But we will have one more Hakushi match that we are going to cover, but it is not Hakushi. It is not Hakushi in the WWF. It is Hakushi working for Dennis Coralluzzo, and it is going to be Hakushi versus Sabu on the next show, which will be it's a very lengthy process to get there, but it combines so many 90s wrestling things that I love, that even though we already have a ton to cover in the next episode, I have to include this. I think it's vital to the story of Michinoku Pro that we talk about Hakushi versus Sabu.
Case, I am sad that we don't do the video podcast of all the kids do these days, because you would have seen my eyebrows just go to the ceiling when you mentioned it was him, the Dennis Coralluzzo line, because I knew what was going to come next. I did not know about this match, but the one person that I linked with in 1995 with Dennis Coralluzzo is Sabu. Hell yeah. I can't wait for that. I'm stoked.
Next episode, obviously, we've got Michinoku Pro to cover, and then we're going to jump to the Coralluzzo territory, and then we'll end with FMW. So we're going to close out 1995 with a bang. But we have to get to the reason that we're here. It took us almost an hour to get here. I have no regrets, though, because I want to talk about Tiger Mask, and I want to talk about Jinsei Shinzaki versus Bret Hart, because I really do think it was a fun match that everybody should seek out. But we have to get to the Fukumen World Masked League of 1995. This was announced at some point in May of that year. We have the Observer from May 22nd saying that Michinoku Pro is doing a 6-man tournament, a 16-man tournament from 721 to 827, billed to determine the top masked wrestler in the world, with Sasuke Delphin and Nanawa representing the home team, plus 7 guys from Mexico, 2 from the United States, and others coming from England, Mongolia, Israel, and Egypt. Mike, I now pass it to you to give us some further background on this tournament.
So, in its own kind of way, it's perfect that Tiger Mask 4 debuts on this episode, because the Fukumen Masked Man League, or Fukumen World League as it becomes to be known after the 1995 variant of it, is directly linked to the Tiger Mask anime and manga. And that was, of course, coming out in 1970. And at least as of the time, like the big storyline for one of the parts of the original Tiger Mask was when the character of Tiger Mask would face off against villainous members of the Tiger's Den stable, something that kind of was revived in the modern Tiger Mask double show. But in this, it was in a Masked World League context. And at least in a very kind of fitting way, at least one of the masked foreigners on this tournament is a direct homage to the Tiger Mask. And the Tiger Mask manga and anime, at least, Golgotha Cross, who we will know later on as Jerry Lynn, was one of the members of the Tiger Den's villain stable in the comic book and in the anime. So doing a world mask league and also having a character of Golgotha Cross there, even though like that timeline wise and when this would happen, like basically Tiger Mask 4 debuts on the 15th, the tournament starts on the 27th. It would not have been like, oh yeah, of course it's going to be like this kind of thing. Tiger Mask is coming in, but it's just a very pointed reference for something that a lot of the audience, and really, I mean, if you're thinking about in 1995, you know who Tiger Mask is. Tiger Mask was one of the more popular manga and animes of its generation. It is completely based off of that. And it'll be interesting if, I don't know, are we going to get to the 1999 Fukumen? Or
Yeah,
the 97?
that's the plan. Again, I would love to see this through the 2000 J Cup.
Right. So something that I want to do when we get to that point is see if there are other kind of wrestlers who are as that character. And as kind of a similar thing case, something that we will talk about really leading off with this tournament in Yahaba is what the hell Super Dolphin is wearing throughout this tournament. Super Dolphin, not dressed as, you know, the Super Dolphin Senor Perfecto that we are used to seeing, not dressed as the Liger thing, not with his Vader mask. Instead, he is dressed as something that I am not certain which one this is. I know that I am kind of the bridge to this kind of part of the Japanese culture case. I am not a Kamen Rider person. I am not actually really a Tiger Mask person, to be honest. But Super Dolphin is essentially wearing a Kamen Rider homage costume throughout the entire tournament. And the only way you know that it is a Super Dolphin is that he is announced as Super Dolphin, and he wears this thing throughout the tournament. You don't get to see his usual fun masks with his face poking out.
No, Super Delphin in this tournament asked the question, how good can a wrestler be? How enjoyable can a wrestler be if their gear is that bad? Because there is something about Delphin on these shows where he just looks distractingly awful, in my opinion.
Yeah, and at least for me, this tournament kind of puts on display the issue that we've had with Delphin, at least in 1995, in that after Sato gets hurt and he's kind of reverting back to what he is, he's really adrift right now. And in this tournament, you could see, at least in the featured matches, the matches that, of course, Delphin wrestles up for, and you could see it in matches that, in the clips, that Delphin is really, in a lot of places, just going into business for Delphin himself and kind of like dicking around a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's excellent analysis of what he's got going on here.
Yeah, so let's start with the first show, the first matches that we have on full on Volume 1, Tape 1. It is from Yahaba on the opening show. Super Dolphin versus Golgotha Cross. Super Dolphin loses this match by count out to Golgotha Cross after a splash to the floor and a pile driver. But we get another introduction of someone who, case, he always made sense in Michinoku Pro. Jerry Lynn as Golgotha Cross is a real delight throughout this tournament.
He's a real delight throughout this tournament. He does also look awful in this match specifically. This is kind of before they figured out what his look was going to be for this tournament. But Lynn is somebody who had wrestled in Universal, had that background. My guess is Delphin probably took care of him when Delphin was a young boy and Lynn was over with Sean Waltman in 1992 for Universal. So they had some level of prior experience or prior connection with each other. And I think Lynn, in his fluidity, in the same way that when Christopher Daniels later comes into this promotion, even a pre-peak Christopher Daniels was already so fluid and so mechanically clean with his wrestling that it worked out for him quite well at Michinoku Pro. I think the same thing can be said for Jerry Lynn. And whereas we'd seen some of the British wrestlers come in earlier in the year and look like their head was struggling to keep above water, or even some of the luchadors we've seen come in and maybe not hit the ground running, it is interesting with Lynn, not that this was a great match by any means, but just to see how competent that he looked from the early going really made me wish that we had more of Jerry Lynn in Michinoku Pro in a variety of contexts throughout this entire timeline.
Yeah, and it just, in a lot of ways, you have this match where Delphin is not taking this seriously really at all, and then Golgotha Cross kind of takes exception to it, and it does kind of feel like, in a way, that there is significant kind of tournament booking throughout this entire tour, and I feel like it's kind of pointed in a way that, at least as we see Delphin in this performance and kind of get kind of put in his place that Delphin has to start off in this tournament, that we should say before we get really deep into it, that the tournament is a standard wrestling tournament, 2 points for a win, 0 for a loss. And the 2 top people in the round robin will face off for the Fukumen World League title, and the 2 losers will have an apuesta. So Delphin, after this match, is absolutely despondent backstage, already being down 0-2, and especially to this outsider, Golgotha Cross, who just kind of just takes him out and then gets back into the ring and celebrates and makes a point that at least Golgotha Cross, going into this first match and getting on to this tour, is making a real impact in Michinoku Pro.
I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves because we have more Jerry Lynn to talk about, and it plays directly into what I'm about to say. But I do think there is an inherent charm in wrestling tournaments when you not only have your point system to determine the semifinals and the finals and the eventual winner, but when you also have something at stake for the guys that finish in last place. And I know Dragon Gate has done this from time to time. I think both in King of Gate and Summer Adventure Tag League, where there have been punishments for the people that finish with the fewest amount of points. And obviously here you get the Jerry Lynn Grand Nanawa match that we'll talk about later. But I think that is such a great concept that certainly I can't think of an American promotion that has ever adopted such a thing. But even in Japan, it seems to come and go. And it's a bummer because I think it adds spice throughout the entire tournament. It does make every match matter.
Yeah, and I think that at least like introducing this here, it provides a level of stakes that it's like, all right, if you are the Michinoku Pro guys here, you're here not only because you wanted to kind of prove that you're the best masked man in your tournament, but like the idea that like everyone around the world is here, and it does feel kind of like the perfect stakes for a tournament like this. That's like, all right, everyone who wants to prove out that you're the best masked wrestler in the world. Okay, that's great, but you have to know that there is a cost to this. And I felt like that, at least as it relates to Dragon Gate with the last place things, a lot of those feel more comedy punitive. This one, at least in 1995, and the way that it's treated, felt like real stakes. And we'll talk about that a lot more when we get into the Puestas match to conclude the tournament.
No, you're exactly right. I mean, the Dragon Gate stuff is typically, at least in the modern era, reserved for Punch Tamanaga and Prom Dragon. The guys that you would expect to have 0 points or to have 2 points, those are the guys that finish that way. Whereas I think it's a really interesting story if just to put on our 2026 Dragon Gate glasses for just a second, if for King of Gate this year they introduce something like this and say it's Jackie Kame, who just keeps on losing via roll-up and keeps on losing via count-out. He's just a guy that can't figure out a way to get the win, and then before you know it, he's at the bottom of his bracket. And I think that's a really interesting thing. I mean, that's the type of thing that I would like to see introduced into the Continental Classic as well. And I don't know what that punishment would be. I mean, I would hope that in wrestling we just start to embrace Apuestas matches more, but I understand that's an uphill battle for a number of reasons. But I like that concept, and I obviously really like the way that it played out throughout this tournament.
Absolutely so. And the way that I think, like, one of the big points that listeners should take away from this is how compact and how self-contained this tournament is with kind of the booking here. You have your first show of the tour, Yahaba. You have this one where, of the Michinoku Pro names, the number 2 guy in the promotion, it has a huge upset. And then you follow that up with this great Sasuke versus Grand Nanawa match that is really, in a lot of ways, as we talked at top, like this show and this episode of Those Days is the rise of what could have been for Grand Nanawa, and what happens when like someone is kind of put to the brink because he pulls off the huge upset in this opening day match where Nanawa just goes after Sasuke's knee and he starts working on his back, which becomes a thing throughout the tour. And he gets the win after pulling up on a Frankensteiner at 1 count to land the Nanawan bomb to win. In case, am I crazy for thinking that this is like a notebook match and that my love of Grand Nanawa now is valid?
No, I have it at 4 stars.
Just tremendous stuff here. Sasuke so giving in this, and Nanawa just going for this at a way that I know that we're not at a place now to really do hindsight here, but it kind of makes me wonder, like, could Nanawa have been the number one heel in this promotion in a way that like he's this guy that has a comedy edge, but like you push him to a certain point, you put him in big time matches, and he's just this kind of devastating grinder. Like, would that have worked in this promotion?
Well, we certainly see it in 96 and 97 where I'm not sure he's that 1A type of wrestler. I just don't know if he had the build for it or the charisma for it. But what we learn from him is that he has this incredibly high ceiling. I mean, we'll get to it in this series at some point, but if you remember that Michinoku Pro multi-man match from the Battle Arts show, that Battle Arts Corkin show in January of 97 that we watched a few years ago when we were doing Greatest Wrestler Ever stuff, that's a match that's a match that's built around Nanawa being the best wrestler in that match. It's sort of the Nanawa Taka Michinoku showcase, and it's like, wow, this is a guy who you wouldn't ever think watching 1993, 1994 Michinoku Pro that he would ever have a ceiling this high, but he does. I mean, this is up to this point in time. I have this at a 4-star match. There's not a ton of 4-star singles matches in Michinoku Pro through halfway through 1995. So by proxy, this is one of the better singles matches in the history of the promotion. Now, as we go along, there's going to be a few here that hit the notebook, but I love that Dave has in the August 14th, 95 Observer, the line, he says, new move invention during a recent Grand Nanawa versus Great Sasuke match. Nanawa did a Frankensteiner off the top rope from the apron, flipping Sasuke outside the ring onto the floor. What Dave does not know is that Nanawa does this Frankensteiner off the top rope to the floor, and Sasuke hits the ground so hard that his shoe flies off, and he wrestles the finish of this match with one shoe on, which is insane even for Sasuke standards.
And it's worth noting that at this point, the back becomes the issue. The leg that Nanawa smartly works on, given the idea that Sasuke was in a cast over the spring and early summer of 95, he goes for the knee, but the match ends up being is, Sasuke's back just got destroyed. How is he going to go through this tour? And instead of the passion of Sasuke being leg work, now it's Sasuke working his back. And it's really a cool thing to watch throughout the tour.
It's why I recommend everybody, and again, maybe some people have done this. Maybe I'm just weird in the way that I approach wrestling sometimes, where although I had seen a lot of these matches, I had never sat down and said, I'm going to watch all of the Masked Man footage in order, in context. But watching this Sasuke run in context was such a fascinating thing for me, because through the first half of this Nanawa match, I'm sitting there watching it and honest to God going, oh, interesting. Like, maybe by mid 1995, the style that Sasuke worked in 93 and 94 is finally caught up to him, because it's a pretty scientific match for the first half of the match. It's a lot of groundwork, and I was actually very intrigued and very invested in what Sasuke was doing on the ground. And then he hits a gorgeous Ai moonsault at one point. And then once Nanawa lands that low blow, it really seems off to the races. And then that's when I realized that I'm an idiot. I was wrong. Sasuke hasn't slowed down at all. And in fact, a few minutes later, he takes a Frankensteiner off the top rope to the floor, and then a Frankensteiner back in the ring. And then, like you said, that gut-wrench powerbomb for the finish. I mean, this is a 4-star match, and it's a suicidal performance from Sasuke. It's the beginning of the tournament, and it only gets worse from there.
Yeah, like this is, I know the J Crown is the real before and after for Sasuke, but it does feel like a level of build to get to that point. And then from here, Case, we get to a point where it's all going to be clips. And I think this is a time where we should talk about the other outsider characters that do come in for this tour, because as we've mentioned, it is the Great Sasuke, it is Super Delphin, and it is Grand Nanawa representing Michinoku Pro. We know about Dos Caras coming into this tournament. We've talked about Golgotha Cross, but that's not the only familiar person that we are aware of that worked under a different gimmick during this tournament. And at least if you're watching this comp tape, at this point, you essentially get to to like this huge block of clipped matches, essentially up until the matches that happen on 8/12. So first off, just because they are in the next clip match on tape from the 28th in Kanagi, we get introduced to the Convict as well as a new generation Mongolian Yuga. It is not Shinzaki. It is them referring to Shinzaki with this character. And it is worth stating at this point that the convict is played by a Michinoku favorite Superboy, and Mongolian Yuga now is played by someone who we really saw in the last few episodes now become a member of the troop from the outside. It's Sho Funaki.
Yes. Yeah, what a fun realization that was, to realize that was Sho Funaki.
Yep, and you see Convict work basically Superboy, but wearing a prison jumpsuit and a Crusher style mask in prison print. His finish is the top rope moonsault as this character, and Superboy is just incredible playing this character throughout this tournament. Mongolian Yuga is mainly sticking to kind of the Mongolian Yuga kind of things here. We get to see Convict wins by a top rope moonsault in this one. We move to Matsushima the next night. It's still Mongolian Yuga, but this time, this is the one person that to this point has remained a complete mystery since 1995. Mongolian Yuga goes up against the King's Cross. In case there's a lot of theories on who the King's Cross might be, and I think everyone who listens to this, watch through the footage, we might be able to have someone go through and go like, oh yeah, no, it's clear this guy. Because in 1995, the consensus kind of was, and nothing definitive, that the King's Cross was friend of Michinoku Pro, at least last few episodes, Stevie J.
It would make sense with the timeline. It would make sense with the build. That is who I am going to tend to believe that this is until I'm proven otherwise.
And it's worth saying that the King's Cross might be the shakiest wrestler in this tournament. He has this wild airplane spin Samoan drop finish that sometimes it looks like he just goes full force into people's chest. And that's the case for poor Funaki in this match, at least in Matsushima. Elsewhere in Matsushima, we get introduced to someone that this was the first time I've seen any of them. The Grand Sheik, who is played by Arias Romero, who I guess is someone that has been like a luchador in and around Mexico in the 80s and 90s, and maybe is there because of Dos Caras.
Yeah, your theory is that he was sort of Dos Caras' bag boy, at least for this tour, which I have a hard time arguing against, given the fact that Dos Caras is on this tour, and given the output from said wrestler. I go, okay, that seems like that all makes sense.
Mostly a whole bunch of punch and kick from the Grand Sheik. That's all that he kind of does. Moving on through the tournament, as the 30th, you have the Convict versus Golgotha Cross. You also have Super Dolphin versus the Bandit, and this is, I think, the last of the unknown characters or the outsiders. The Bandit is better known as Michinoku Pro favorite Palito Suicida, and he's the one person who brings multiple sets of gears and masks for this tournament.
I wish we would have gotten more of the Bandit on this tour, at least in tape and full.
Yeah, I don't think we get ever a full Bandit match on tape. Just flashing through everything, they go to Tajima. The big storyline is that the Convict is basically unstoppable throughout this first week of the tour. He runs through Grand Nanawa. He already went through Golgotha Cross and Mongolian Yuga. And August 1st, you have King's Cross versus the Bandit, Super Delphin versus Grand Sheik in a match that led me to a question. Case, do you know when the Mysterio Rana became an established move? Was it already established in 95?
I would think it would have been established by 95, especially by the summer of 95.
Yeah, at least for me, it just was like a thing in my notes going like, is it something that I know Ray, of course, popularized the move, but I just was not certain the first time that he did it that made tape necessarily. But that was the one note I had from there. And then from there, at this point, if you're watching the comp tape, you get a intermission that is clips from the rest of the tour. It's a lot of botches. It's a lot of brawling around. On the second tape, there's a whole 5-minute section just devoted to card attacks on it. It is kind of a wild thing, but it's one of those things that makes this a compilation tape kind of go by faster, knowing that there's 20 minutes of just clips throughout it. Did you end up watching all of these clips?
So I didn't watch all of them, but I did have a revelation watching some of this clip stuff, and it plays into the next two matches that we're going to talk about, which is Sasuke versus Delphin from the 12th and Sasuke versus the Convict from the 13th. I've got to make a roundabout point here. When the Greatest Wrestler Ever project was happening a decade ago, and there were discussions as to who the number one wrestler was going to be. So this is now, we're debating Flair, we're debating Funk, we're debating Kobashi, and we're debating Misawa for the most part. Those were a lot of the names that came up. This will sound like an asinine complaint that people are making, but when you're discussing who the greatest wrestler ever is, this is the type of stuff that you have to get into. There was a knock on Misawa specifically that since the 2006 Smarks Choice poll, which was, again, Greatest Wrestler Ever project hosted by the Smarks Choice Forum that was the inspiration behind Pro Wrestling only doing it 10 years later, there had been all this new All Japan handheld footage that had surfaced in the decade since that Smarks Choice poll. And so we had All Japan house shows with tags and six-man tags in particular that people didn't see in 2005, 2006 that they had since seen in 2015 and 2016. And one of the dings against Misawa that you couldn't really ding Flair for, that you couldn't really ding Funk for, that you couldn't ding Kobashi for, was that on these house shows in these random towns, on shows that weren't filmed for TV and that the wrestlers would have had no knowledge of them being filmed, period, that Misawa did not work that hard on house shows, at least compared to his contemporaries. And there were some people that were very hung up on this idea that Misawa can't be the greatest wrestler ever because look at how lazy he was in tag matches on house shows. I bring this up because the Michinoku Pro footage, by and large, that we have is the Michinoku Pro footage that we've always had. You know, I was just talking to somebody over the weekend because, and I don't want to say too much, but there was recently some Lucha Resu footage that was discovered that has never been seen before. I don't know what the plan is in terms of uploading it and making it more widely accessible, but we came across some new Gran Hamada footage recently, which was very exciting for me. But the Michinoku Pro stuff, what we have is what we've had. It's what we've always had. It's not like we've had a bunch of Michinoku Pro handhelds surface in the last 20 years. So getting to see just in montage form the stuff that Sasuke was doing on some of these shows in front of 100 people, 200 people. You know, you go back to the tour opener and Dave has the attendance for Yahaba on July 27th as 795 people. But as you go through the tour, it's 275 here, 203 there, 227 here, 325 here. And you see what Sasuke's doing on some of these shows, and he never takes it easy. And it makes the lore of 93, 94, 95, 96 Sasuke that much more insane when you watch this comp tape and you see the beatings that he would take, sometimes not even in tournament matches, just in multi-man matches on this tour. The beating he was taking was completely insane when you factor in what he was doing against Nanawa and Delphin and the Convict and then later Dos Caras on TV. It's madness. And it gave me, I guess, on one hand, a new appreciation for Sasuke and that he really did all but kill himself for the Michinoku Pro banner. But it also makes sense that once he slowed down, there was just no way that he was ever going to be able to build himself back up again. It is so, you know, we talk about the longevity of wrestlers now and how guys take care of themselves better and they have these 20, 25-year careers, and that's almost become the norm in pro wrestling. Sasuke had 5 or 6 years at his peak, and then he couldn't go anymore, and he can't go now. But when you look at what he was doing on every single show, or at least what it would appear to be, it is mental to think that he made it as long as he did in his, quote, prime.
Yeah, because there's absolutely no way to make the argument, given the footage we have now, that Sasuke ever took a night off during the at least this time period of Michinoku Pro. And when you think about like the schedule and what Sasuke in particular, like how many matches he was having at these times. I mean, just pulling up a very quick thing here. He was between 94 and 90 and 97. He would essentially do close to 600 matches, and he would not really come close to that amount other than 2001 for the rest of his career. So this is the time that Sasuke has months like that during this tour. He's working 24 days in August. He's working 15 days in October. So when you just look at that in that context, you're working a 24-day schedule case, and you look at how this really went. There's not many days off. There's no really time to recoup. They're essentially working every day from the 27th of July. They take a day off on the 31st of July, and then they work basically straight through to the 12th. Okay, there you maybe get another day off. Your day off comes on their next day off afterwards comes the 19th. There's no time for recovery for this guy, and he's still not taking it easy, and it's so kind of remarkable to do. Let's jump ahead to now that we talked about like the blooper reels with that, and we've introduced everyone, we're just going to focus on the matches themselves that we have in full, and that the next time we have that is in Yamagata on the 12th of August. We revisit the feud that kind of built this promotion back in 93. It's Great Sasuke versus Delphin one more time. And case, at least for me, it was nice to have this match for Delphin's sake, because we got to see some of the shades of 93 and 94 Delphin here in a tour where you didn't get a whole lot of that.
Yeah, so this match is August 12th, 1995. Their last singles match before this was August 24th, 1993. So a full 2 years since their last singles match. Their next singles match, for reference, because we were just talking about it, is in the 1999 Master League. So they don't revisit this match in a singles capacity until 99 or 90. Is that
99? Fukumen goes 4 years. I thought near immediately. I think it's 99. Because and that would line up also because he's out of the company by 2000, and he doesn't have another singles match with Delphin or with Sasuke until 2010.
Yes, you're right. This is from a tour in 1998 called the Master World League Match Selection Tour, but it doesn't seem to be an official tournament. Although there is this is fascinating, not to jump too far ahead, sorry about this, but there's an NG Hammer versus Convict match on this show. NG Hammer, of course, the masked Grand Hamada character. So I'll need more context on that when we get to it. That is fascinating. But it's 1998 the next time they have a singles match, and then it's not until Delphin returns to Michinoku Pro in 2003 for the 10th anniversary show. That is their next singles match. So really rare air here. You know, they wrestled a ton in Universal one-on-one, and then you get the two matches at the start of the promotion, July of 93 and August of 1993. But it's been a long time coming. These guys have changed so much as wrestlers since their last singles match. And I think they went out and had, up to this point, the biggest junior epic that Michinoku Pro has seen.
Yeah, and I think part of it is that you have the Sasuke formula that perfectly fits in with the Delphin formula of Sasuke selling like death, passion of Sasuke, with Delphin in a lot of ways being the best part of Delphin, which is being the Lucha-Res Ric Flair throughout it. A lot of back to bases, like things that you would have seen in that summer of 1993. Focus backward. At this point, Sasuke has a target on his back. He's ragdolling himself throughout this entire tour. But he's able to fight out of a Dolphin clutch, something that's still very rare in the promotion at this point. There's a couple cases of basically on this tour, only him and Dos Caras able to not be pinned by it. One of like the most Terry Funk rounding body presses that I've ever seen with it, but it ends up with Sasuke putting him away good with the Thunderfire powerbomb. Dude's rock case, easy 4 stars for me.
I was at 4.25 on this one just because I thought Sasuke was able to essentially convey the idea of misery so well, and Delphin's offense looked so vicious with every single thing that he did. And I think in a standalone setting, that works really well. But when you have the context of what Sasuke had already been through in this tournament, it ticked it up a 1/4 star for me. I really loved this.
Yeah, and then you have the post match of the crowd mobbing the ring, chanting Sasuke, and Delphin being left to kind of contemplate it in the backstage. If you're someone who loves seeing really despondent Super Delphin, this is the comp tape for you, because after each one of his full matches that he loses, he's basically bawling backstage. It's tremendous. We move the next day.
Just real quick, just because I have to mention this, because we talked about this. I think it was the end of '94 that this came up
with Kai and Tai. Yeah.
That is just an underrated part of Michinoku Pro that I don't really think it's talked about, is just the post-match production style they were able to nail is like a really special thing that I would say. I mean, it's a different thing in New Japan. You know, New Japan has their own way of not only doing the post-match promo, but also they have the press conference sort of real sports style post-game interview set up backstage, which I love, and I sort of wish AEW would adopt it a little bit more just in terms of the North American stuff. But nobody really captures just the post-match just exhaustion in the way that Michinoku Pro has. And that feels like a real missed opportunity in wrestling. They are so good at this post-match capture of emotion.
Yeah, it's sincerely like one of my favorite things. And I think that in a lot of ways, it's such like a basic kind of thing that I wonder with the way that like independent wrestling is now, like, is that the only context that this kind of thing would work nowadays? Like with the way that Japanese wrestling is, like, I mean, like Dragon Gate does the end of the show promo and that's it. And that's kind of the end of that sort of thing. And New Japan has their kind of situation with that. It just, this feels like something that really could have been like, if Gabe had the idea and was really into it, Gabe would have just had this nonstop, that everyone backstage, he would be talking to Brent Albright all the time. I feel like that this is a trope that I would love to see if someone could actually make it work in modern day, but I wonder if it's now we're past it in a way that at least how wrestling is treated, and it's kind of sad to say.
Well, yeah, I mean, Gabe in his own special way had his own style of the way that he captured backstage, but it felt way more produced. And at least when I think about Gabe era Ring of Honor and I think about some of that stuff, it's more, and I could be proven wrong on this, but my memory is that it's more guy yelling at camera backstage, even after, say, a hard-fought Ring of Honor World title match, than it is just showing a guy laying on the ground, which is often what Michinoku Pro is doing, which I guess if you're not watching the footage, that might sound insane, but I can't overstate how impactful it is the way they capture it.
Yeah, and it's not just Delphin. It happens a lot with like Sasuke looking like he's dead on the ground. And it really solidifies the passion of Sasuke and the idea he just absolutely just destroys himself during this like 4-year stretch for him. Anything else before we want to move on to 813?
I want to talk about my personal favorite match of the tournament.
All right. So we go to Shizukawa the next day, which is worth stating that Sasuke gets basically worked over the night before by his kind of career rival. And then he has to face the Convict in Shirakawa, and the Convict absolutely destroys him. There are moments of that that Sasuke is trying to fight back, get back into it, but this is as much of a demolition of Sasuke that we've ever seen in this promotion at this point in time, and it absolutely rules. Convict wins with a moonsault press on Sasuke's back in a match where he just constantly just threw his body onto Sasuke's back, and Sasuke just was flattened and sold it like death. And it was, in a way, kind of a simple match, but for what it was, just insanely competent at what it was. I was not notebook on it, Case. I'm going to hand it over to you, but it is one of those matches that is worth going out of your way for. It just was a shade blow it for me.
So, like I said at the top of this episode, you know, I had seen Sasuke versus Delphin before. I have notes dating back to 2015 that says that I had seen Sasuke versus Nanawa, but I didn't really have any recollection of it. And then I had seen, Nanawa versus Jerry Lynn, which we'll talk about here in just a second, and the Sasuke versus Dos Caras matches. But I had never seen this match before. This is not one that was hosted on the Ditch website. He had, because I've got it pulled up here, from the Mass League, Ditch had a joint in progress version of Sasuke versus Nanawa. He had Sasuke versus Delphin, Delphin versus Nanawa, Dos Caras versus Delphin, which I believe is on that second comp tape in full. And then the two Sasuke versus Dos Caras matches, as well as Nanawa versus Jerry Lynn. So he's hosting essentially all of the matches that we have in full, with the exception of this match, which makes me worry that a lot of people that even enjoy Michinoku Pro have never seen this match before. And I was so just overjoyed by what I saw in this match, because you're right, it's a painfully simple match. The Convict is twice the size of Sasuke, certainly in terms of width, but almost in terms of height as well, because it's not like Convict is a huge guy, but Sasuke is Sasuke. And they work it with the simplicity that you would find in Mid-South Wrestling a decade prior, where Sasuke comes in with a bad back, Convict is much bigger than him. And like you said, the match is the Convict throwing his body at Sasuke in a variety of ways, all of which seem to be incredibly painful. This has to be the only Michinoku Pro match in history in which the body slam was used as efficiently and effectively as it was here. But it's not just like it just goes to show how uninventive wrestling can be sometimes, where this wasn't just body slam, bear hug, cut to commercial, come back, come from commercial, babyface comeback, and then maybe the heel, cheats and gets the edge here. This is the Convict constantly applying pressure, but also doing a bunch of insane stuff in his own right. He does a flipping senton to the back of Sasuke. He does a flipping senton off the apron onto the wood floor. Sasuke finally gets some offense when they get back in the ring. He hits the Convict with a wheel kick. Convict ducks outside the ring and runs to the far side of the gym, because I think at that point he's like, oh my God, how is this guy not dead? And then Sasuke goes on a string of offense that is then interrupted by a body slam on the hardwood floor, followed by a flipping senton off the apron on the floor. What the Convict does in this match is so brutal on its own, but when you watch him versus Nanawa, meaning Sasuke, when you watch Sasuke versus Nanawa, and then the night before Sasuke versus Delphin, and then you see the way that they're able to put together this match, I was smiling from ear to ear watching this. This was gorgeous pro wrestling. The Convict, otherwise known as Superboy, continues to be a shining star in this podcast series. 4.25 stars, my favorite match of the tournament. I loved this so much.
Just like, I'm glad that we got to have this Convict match in full, just because that's, I think, and it might be because I've watched these two tapes back to back and it blends together just slightly. I think this is the only full Convict match we get on this tour, and it's absolutely a full delight. The next match that we have is still from that show, Delphin versus Nanawa. The Delphin core explodes. It's worth noting, Convict is canonically Delphin core. He comes out with Yone Genjin, and he has his chain. He is Delphin core, but we have Delphin core versus Delphin core as the main event of this show. And Nanawa taking a couple losses at this point, but still having a little bit of momentum, finally stepping up against the boss, and the boss has to use a desperation Mysterio Rana to escape this and keep himself in play at the top end of the tournament. And Nanawa continues his kind of losing streak after taking out Sasuke on the first night.
I like a fun Rudo on Rudo crime match. I did not love this, but I was entertained, I guess, for what it was.
Yeah, and this was a Delphin trying, and I appreciated that he tried in this match at that level. but like it is not the killer match that it really could be. And then we go back to basically touring stuff. Dos Caras shows up essentially at the end of the first volume of the tape. We get the intermission with 5 minutes of push cart. And at that point, I don't have your match list pulled up on me, but we do have 818 Super Dolphin versus Dos Caras is the next full match, or at least mostly full match on this tape.
And this is sort of one of those where you have to ask yourself, was Delphin trying or not? And I would lean no on this one.
Yeah, and I think you also have the thing that Dos Caras in the footage that you see, he has a formula he kind of keeps to outside of the Sasuke match, and that kind of hurts it as it goes along. One nice thing about the tapes, you do get intermittently through the intermissions, you do get to see the chart, and basically the storyline of the tournament is that you have, as you'd expect, Delphin and Sasuke towards the top. Caras comes in and just goes on a winning way, and at the bottom you just have Nanawa stuck with the invaders and Gorgon Cross, who is selling his knee throughout the entire kind of tournament, and the question kind of becomes who's going to be in the bottom, who is in the top. You kind of have a middle picking at that point, but we will move forward towards the last week of the tournament as we get one of the matches that is in full. It is the first edition of Great Sasuke versus Dos Caras from Mutsa on the 23rd of August.
What do you think about this? You go first on this one.
I liked the final a bit more. I think the final was the match that I saw in the past. I did like that Sasuke was kind of subjected to a guy that kept him to the Dos Caras kind of formula, and Sasuke kind of working that towards his passion of Sasuke back stuff. I appreciate how Caras kind of feels. He always kind of felt in control of this, which made the last ditch K Brada and Sasuke special count out and feel a little deserved, especially how it kind of gets worked off of in the final. But I think the final is a much better match.
I think the final's a much better match also. I guess I'm entertained by the idea of like, okay, Dos Caras is this guy who worked 70s All Japan and then, spent a decade in Mexico and then worked a little bit at Universal and then came back here to Michinoku Pro. And so, a decade prior, it's like if I pull up the 1979 All Japan stuff that he did, it's him against the Funks, and it's him against Kentaro Oki, and it's him against Abdullah and the Sheik. And it's like that, in his mind, that is what Japanese wrestling is. And then he's dumped into this context where he's stretching out Sasuke like there's no tomorrow, and Sasuke just will not go away. And as the match progresses, Caras gets more and more violent with him, which I think is really entertaining, especially on the meta level of like, God, this guy is so much different than all the All Japan guys I was wrestling a decade ago. But I don't think this match is very good, and I think they have a much better one in store when they get to the finals of this tournament.
No, I'm with you. I was just over 3 stars on this. It's worth touching on before we get to the final day, how it kind of gets there. Nanawa never really gets out of the starting blocks after the victory over Sasuke. His only other win is an Imabetsu against the Bandit when it's a mule kick schoolboy, and it leads you to Hashikami on the 24th. Sasuke versus Nanawa. You don't get to see a whole lot with it, but the loss sends Nanawa to the mass match, and we get one of those great despondent backstage kind of moments with Nanawa where he's like, I got to do this match, and I know I can get through this. And then you see after this Delphin versus Mongolia and Yuga, and it shows the level of confidence that the company already has in Sho Funaki as he gets the tournament ruiner win for over Super Dolphin. So that knocks Delphin into a clear 3rd place and sets up our finals on the 28th of August at the Amori Prefectorial Gym. You get 1341 there. And you have your losers match, Mascara contra Mascara, Grand Nanawa versus Golgotha Cross, and the final of the 1995 first Fukumen World League, the Great Sasuke versus Dos Caras. And we're going to talk about what I think was my favorite match of 1995 so far in Michinoku Pro. And I would have to quickly go back through all my notes to see my favorite match before that. Case, am I insane for thinking that Grand Nanawa versus Golgotha Cross is a 4.5 star match? Because I loved it. It was
that's what I have it at as well.
God. Grand Nanawa just completely goes for it in this match. You get mask ripping near immediately. Nanawa hating on Cross's knee. Jerry completely rips off his mask, does a pile driver onto the stair. Nanawa is bleeding, and it's the great kind of mask rip that it is the one where the mask is left around your neck. It's the same thing that happened to Dragon Kid in 2020. And I have to declare this case. I have one match previous to this, the Mockland Jinsei Shinzaki versus Terry Boy match, where I was like, this is a hell yeah match. This is the second hell yeah match on Mike's Michinoku Pro comp tape. I absolutely adore it. Nanawa rolls through a European clutch to get the win, and Golgotha unmasks himself as Minnesota's own Jerry Lynn.
There's just nothing like this match. And to this point, you know, I would still have the main event from the 1994 Cork and Hall show as the best thing we've seen in Michinoku Pro thus far, but I would have this behind it only by a touch. It is just the beauty of pro wrestling. This is going to be a bizarre comp. I don't know if you'll agree with this or not. I don't know if you've seen the match I'm about to reference. This match to Michinoku Pro is what the Adam Pearce Brent Albright match was in Ring of Honor.
Yes, I see your point. Yeah,
where it's just like, it was like, okay, all right, I believe on paper Jerry Lynn versus Grand Nanawa should be a good match, and I believe that on paper, in the right context, Adam Pearce versus Brent Albright should be a good match. It has no business being as good as it was, but it is the beauty of art. You know, no matter what the medium is, where sometimes things just come together in this way where you're left going like, what was that? Why was that so good? That had no right to be as good as it was. And between the crowd and Lynn fully embracing this role as a heel, Nanawa, who we've seen as a full-blown Rudo against Sasuke, as a full-blown Rudo out-Rudoing Delphin, then coming across like this heroic babyface because he's the homegrown Michinoku Pro guy in this match. And then the violence that ensues where you get Lynn pile driving Nanawa onto a chair, which gets a crazy amount of heat. And then Nanawa rolls to the floor. And it's just one of those happy accidents where they capture the blood from his forehead dripping onto the gym floor, and they just shoot it in a way that is, dare I say, because it's a gross word to use in 2026, cinematic. And it is so beautiful in the way that they shoot it. And from that point on, you are watching a war as much as you are watching a wrestling match. And it is just one of those historical anomalies where you go, God, I can't believe this was as good as it was.
Yeah, and special note for Jerry Lynn, when they go to the floor, he goes all the way to the far side to go pull the chair out from the crowd before the pile driver, and it's perfect. It's like, oh no, that's exactly what you have to do. I had to rewind and watch it several times because I was just like, this is someone, at least at this point, who is like in just absurd control of the scenario at a level that, I mean, I've seen like Jerry Lynn before, like ECW and all of that kind of stuff, and especially where he was at some points. But this was just something else to kind of see with this, and it's easily on my comp tape that after the series is over, where I put together my personal hell yeah matches, and it's really coming out of this tour. I have such more of a deep appreciation for Nanawa, not as kind of the goonish comedy figure that we've seen him so far, and we see him a lot in the future, but he really is able to just turn it on at this point at a level that is really, really kind of shocking. And it's nice to see like that with how the promotion is going, especially at a time. Shiryu is not in this tournament. This is a big step up for Nanawa, at least where it is in Massman. No Shiryu, no Hanzo Nakajima. Nanawa, coming out of this tournament, at least for me, case, has as much of a claim of being a cornerstone of this promotion as anyone who is not Kai and Tai or Sasuke at this point, especially coming out of this match. It's special stuff.
Do you think the Dragon Gate comp for Nanawa in many ways is Genki Horiguchi, where, you know, he knows his role and then all of a sudden he vaults up his ceiling in a way that is just almost hard to comprehend at times?
I would extend that his normal role is Genki Horiguchi, that he has a certain edge of KZ, that when Nanawa is treated like a face, the crowd is so behind Nanawa. Like, there's a natural liking of him that you don't have with Delphin. So I think Genki's a really appropriate thing, but he has a little bit of a KZ that never was actualized upon edge to him as well.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then we have the final of the first Fukumen World League, the Great Sasuke versus Dos Caras. Working off of the match they would have in the block play, and what it eventually ends up being is Dos Caras kind of abandoning the format he has chosen and going after the bullseye on Sasuke's back. He wins with 2 power balls in succession, including a Liger Bomb, and Sasuke is left in a crumple after this 21-minute final match. I really like this one. A shade below the other the other Nanawa matches on the tour, but Sasuke, he went through it on this tour, and that's a level of appreciation. And Dos Caras stepped to the occasion after being kind of unimpressed with him in his other kind of work on the tour.
Let me put it this way. Sasuke starts the tour with a Frankensteiner off the top rope to the floor that he takes from Grand Nanawa. He ends the tour with Dos Caras powerbombing him off the apron to the floor. And along the way, it's not like he took it easy in between. It is, just based on the footage we have, just from the full-length Sasuke matches, one of the more impressive individual tour performances that I have ever seen in pro wrestling. Not in the same way of Shingo and Ospreay in the 2019 Super Juniors, where every match they had was a notebook match, and not in the way of, Masaki Mochizuki and El Numero Uno 2002, and not in the way of Ryo Saito and King of Gate 2005, but just in terms of conveying emotion from start to finish in telling this confined story. I think what Sasuke did here was probably the most impressive work of his career. I think I'm leaving this tournament with a higher opinion of Sasuke than I've ever had before, which includes the J-Cup stuff in 94 and all of the great stuff that he did that year. I think I'm most impressed by his work in this tournament more than anything else he's ever done.
It's really just like, I know I make references of the passion of Sasuke, but just the way that he put himself through it.
The powerbomb to the floor in this match is completely insane. I don't know if I've ever seen anybody else do that.
Yeah. Dos Caras' power bombs look like the most brutal thing.
Yeah, it wasn't okay, we're going to jump off the apron, I'm going to land on my feet and then drop you. It was, I am power bombing you off the apron to the floor, and I'm doing it as if we were doing it in the ring.
Yeah, because it's the same amount of force that he does, and because his Liger Bomb is one of the more like dangerous looking Liger Bombs I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
Like it makes me want him to stop doing just like going for Mexican stretches and kind of doing what Ultimo does now, because it's like, no, Dos Caras, I know where you are and what comes for you after this. You could have done this the whole entire tour and have been really kind of sick.
It's insane. I found that bump to be completely disgusting in the best way possible. And again, I think this might be peak Sasuke. I don't know. I was just blown away by what he did in this tournament.
Yeah, I am really with you on it. I think that Sasuke just completely, like, it really gives you a new level of appreciation for like what he was in this time period. at that point. And then Nanawa showing that when they needed him to, he was able to step up to that level. And, you know, I still have a special place in my heart for Super Delphin, but this was not his greatest tour that we got to see. Any other big thoughts you have on this tour or just Michinoku Pro at this point before we talk about what we're going to review next on those days and get out of here?
I think in the same way that when we were in 1993, the Shinzaki versus Terry Boy match caught us all by surprise in terms of just how much fun it was. And on the most recent episode, we had that Sasuke and Hoshikawa versus Nanawa and Taka Michinoku match, which really jumped out to us as being something really special. If you've never seen Sasuke versus Convict, I am starting to believe that that is the true hidden gem of all that we've seen so far. And that match, I'm just smiling from ear to ear thinking about how great it was. So that is my recommendation. Of course, Lin versus Nanawa if you've never seen it, but Sasuke versus Convict, I get the impression that that match hasn't been passed around as much, and that's a shame because that is a really, really enjoyable pro wrestling match.
Yeah, and I think it's really just for like historical record and the fact that have they announced his final date yet for Tiger Mask 4? Are we?
I don't think so. Or if they have, I don't know it. Let me put it that way.
I think it's kind of important the fact that his debut match got unearthed a little bit. And I think that's kind of interesting to kind of see him there as a preview of what we will see with him going forward in this project. And really starting from the next episode on, he is going to be a regular figure until the end of the promotion, or at least until the end of those days.
I'm looking forward to it.
So what are we going to be talking about in episode 12, Case?
So the idea, and again, maybe we'll start coming through this footage and realize that we have to split this up into 2 episodes, but the idea next time is that we will put a bow on 1995. We will see the Tiger Mask debut on September 25th, 1995. We will move to the Dennis Coralluzzo territory for Sabu versus Hakushi. We'll make a brief stop in WAR to talk about the 1995 J Cup. We will talk about some more Michinoku Pro shows they have at the end of December. And we will end with an all-star 6-man tag and FMW featuring some of the biggest stars in Michinoku Pro. Hopefully we get to all of that on the next episode. I am quite excited for it.
Yeah, I am ready to go for that as well. You could, to keep track with those days, the best ways to do that is on the Voices of Wrestling Discord in the VoiceGate channel. That's where by the time you all listen to this, you'll have a full show guide and match list of things that we talked about today. But as well, there's always a full WordPress post on the Voices of Wrestling website a couple days after the show goes up. So if you're listening to this a couple more days after release, that's where you can kind of find the footage there. But you can follow us also on social media. Open the Voice Gate is at Open Voice Gate, both on Twitter and Blue Sky. Case is at _ in your case on Twitter. I'm at Fujiheya for Twitter. Or at Fujiheya on Twitter as well. That's going to do it for this edition of Those Days. We'll be back with you next time to talk about the end of 1995, some Dennis Coralluzzo, and a whole lot more. Take care, everyone, and have a good night.
Hello, do you like New Japan Pro Wrestling? Are you a Shin Nihon freak? If so, check out the Super J-Cast with Joel and Damon on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network.
And even if you fucking hate New Japan Pro Wrestling, listen to the Super J-Cast anyway. Not just for our great show reviews, analysis, and pastrami sandwiches, but there's also usually some dick jokes somewhere in the obligatory opening 30 minutes of absolute nonsense we chat about every single week. That's the Super J-Cast for all the best talk about New Japan Pro Wrestling, crisps, and pornography.